Welcome back. South Africa's Department of Justice is yet to decriminalise sex work. Lobby groups have been for a while now complaining about the slow pace of finalising laws. Let's unpack the story further. We're joined this afternoon by Megan Lessing. She's the spokesperson for Sex Workers Education and Advocacy Task Force, or as we know it, SWET. Megan, it's great to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed for coming on to the programme. So we are seeking to change the law as it is, but as it is this Wednesday, sex work, the buying and selling of sex for money, is still illegal in South Africa.
It is still illegal. It has been criminalized. The legislation that criminalizes sex work has its history and roots in the Pre-Apartheid Immorality Act. That act has since evolved, and in the beginning it was only the selling of sex that was criminalized, and then in 2007 also the buying of sex, also clients were then criminalized. So yes, currently still illegal to sell sex or buy sex in South Africa.
But are we sort of ahead of the curve, Megan, in that we could be, if indeed we do get going on these laws, which have been in the works for quite some time. I can't remember the exact date now, but you'll give us some clarity on that. We may well be the first country on the continent to legalize sex work, right?
So yeah, it's a very high probability that we might be the first country to decriminalize sex work, but it's also a global curve, ahead of the global curve. Right. I mean, the countries that, the legal models employed in different countries are varied. There's different legal models that can be, but very few countries are actually fully decriminalized. I mean, the only country is New Zealand. Belgium just recently became the first European country to decriminalize sex work. And then I think the third state, so Australia so far has decriminalized sex work in about 2 or 3 states so far. But I know they are moving incrementally based on the uniqueness of how the legislation, per state has to be reformed. But I think we're ahead of the curve, both in terms of the continent and also in terms of a global positioning.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, for those of us who are perhaps looking at this conversation in one lens, let's say from a morality perspective, Megan, give us your explanation on why this is not a morality issue.
So morality. Yeah. South Africa, by nature is a deeply religious and cultural society, but we also have probably the best constitution in the world, and whatever your belief system is and wherever you align, it does not give you the right to encroach on the human rights, the right to choose to do the work that you do, the rights to human dignity, the right to bodily autonomy, all those rights enshrined in the Constitution. So as much as I cannot judge someone for their religious and positions, similarly, you are entitled to those, but you cannot encroach on the rights of others.
Right.
So your personal morality is really your own.
Right, absolutely. And of course it also means that sex workers can get the help that they need and that resources can be put into the sector of society.
Yeah, there's very little, when people talk about sex work, they don't talk about the impact of criminalization of what it actually means, There's this opportunities like this to talk and to educate is that, yes, because often our misconceptions and our fears of why the decriminalization might lead to is often because we don't know, what is currently happening, currently in the illegal context of the industry. Sex workers face extreme high levels of violence, extreme, the gender-based violence, the National Strategic Policy and Plan on Gender-Based Violence recognizes that in its Pillar 3 to say that decriminalize sex work to address gender-based violence. The Strategic Plan on HIV also recognizes the decriminalization of sex work as a tool to address the HIV infection rate. So those are already policy positions in terms of the country and how we address our pandemics, the high rates of violence that women and other vulnerable populations face. The escalating HIV infection rate. So those are the lived realities. And then you bring in stigma and access to justice and in terms of health and access to access to justice, to be able to go to a police station and to access justice and legal services, but then also barriers to health, the lived experience of how stigma creates those barriers for sex workers to access, safe sex options and interventions, health interventions. Yeah. So that is actually what the impact of criminalization is.
Megan, I wonder, as we discuss what is an incredibly important issue, and we demonstrate just how slowly we've moved in many respects compared to the rest of the world, some parts of the global north, for example. It's a question to ask as we head to the elections in May on whether anything has been said about this issue in the manifestos that political parties have been launching over the past weeks and months.
So I think Daily Maverick about a week ago published an article as such. They didn't at the time got comment from all the political parties, but I think they provided like a brief summary of what it is. So in terms of the bill, the timing of the elections sort of put a spanner in it, but it also then gives, sex workers and other vulnerable populations an opportunity to look at those manifestos and then vote in your best interest, So, I think the ANC did not respond, but also the ANC is the ruling party currently. There is a bill being redrafted by the Department of Justice that will see its introduction once the new parliament or the new administration kicks off. And I think the Democratic Alliance at that point say that they are interested in looking at decriminalisation. But they were talking a lot about, licensing authorities and stuff like that. That's something we're going to have to unpack, in stigma in terms of countries like the Netherlands, where sex work is legal, it's legalized and not decriminalized. Much of the interventions or regulations around how they have addressed it is extremely stigmatizing, the sort of bureaucracy around how many times you need to do HIV testing. It addresses issues such as bodily autonomy and the right to make your own health decisions. So we are wary, but also aware that we need to have these conversations around the regulatory framework that would support a decriminalized system. So I'm thinking of the other parties. I think the PA said that they have sort of enlighten themselves about what the clear impact of criminalization is and fully supports the decriminalization of sex work. And although the EFF didn't respond, they've been clear, and it is in the manifesto. They've actually sent us a copy at the time when they launched their manifesto that they fully support the decriminalization of sex work. I'm thinking other parties. I know Action SA has also said that they support, the rights of sex workers. I've realized that some parties are maybe intentionally vague, but I do know that there are parties such as the IFP who recognizes the rights of sex workers to enjoy the same protections, but are not necessarily convinced of sex work as work and as a form of employment,
Yeah.
So the positions vary. But we are hoping, that this is also an opportunity for political parties to reach out to us and have a conversation about, what influenced their position.
Megan Lessing, thanks so much for your time. And ultimately, it's about enhancing sex workers' legal protection and their ability to access key rights. Megan, you talked about justice and healthcare just as a start. Megan Lessing is the spokesperson for SWET. It is the Sex Workers Education and Advocacy Task Force.